In this video, I'm going to continue working on the test user login functionality, and I'm going to create an HTTP request. So if I bring up my Postman and look at the login request that we used to send to let user login, it was HTTP post request sent to /users login, and then it contained this JSON payload with two keys, email and then password. So let me first create this JSON payload, and we already know how to do it. We used to do it in the create user test class. We simply create a hash map and then put values into it and then use that hash map in the request, and it's the framework that takes this hash map and then converts it for us into a JSON or XML depending on the content type we specify. Okay, so let's create a hash map. I will use map, and that will be string. I will call it login details equals new hash map, like this. Let's put it, and let's import hash map, and let's import map, like this. Now let's put some values. I will use a login details and then put, and if I go back to my Postman, it has to be email and then email address. So the key is email, and then value for email address. Let me actually put the value outside of this test method, like private final string, and I will call it email address equals, and I will need to provide a real email address, the one that I used to create a new account. So I'll go here and I will copy the email address which I used to create a new user account. That was Sergey Kargapolov at swiftdeveloperblog.com. It has to be a real email address because an email message was sent to that email address. And if I have created an account using this email address, then I have to use this email address for the login flow. So I'll copy email address, I'll paste it here. And now I will need to provide the password. And same with the password, I'll have to provide a real password that I used during the registration flow. So I'll copy the password key so that I don't make a typo. And the value I will copy from here. So the password that I used in my previous test was 123. So I'll paste the value of the password here. Okay, so we have the JSON payload ready. Again, we've created a hash map, but it is the framework that will help us to convert this hash map into JSON or XML, depending on the content type that we specify now. So now we're going to create that HTTP request. So we will go with given. It doesn't see it again, so let's go to test method and let's copy the static rest assured given, static import. I'll paste it here. Now we can use given, and given that the content type of this HTTP request is application JSON, and given that the accept header of this HTTP request is also application JSON, let's actually do this as well. We will take the application JSON out of this test method, and we will create a private final string class field. So that's private string, I'll call it JSON equals, and then paste it here. Now I can use this JSON in my content type, and I can also use it inside of the accept. Okay, so given that the content type is JSON, that the accept header is also JSON, and that this HTTP request will contain a body, and that body will contain a JSON payload login details. Okay, so let's continue, and the next step for us is to use when let's take it to a new line. We're saying when HTTP post request is sent to the following URL, and the URL starts for us with a context path, and then plus /users/login, right? So if I go to Postman, this is the URL that we used, context path /users/login. So when HTTP post request is sent to the following URL, and we will continue, then, and now is the time to assert. Now we will assert that the status code of this request should be equal to 100. If the login was successful, then HTTP status code should be 200 and not a 500 or not a 4 or 3 status code. It should be 200. Let me finish it here at this moment. I'll just put semicolon and start status code on the new line. And what I will do, I will I will extract the response. So I will use extract, and I will extract the response from this HTTP response, and I will assign it to a new object, response equals. Now when I have the response object, let me import it first from IO rest assured response. Now when I have this response object, I can access headers. So I will use response object to read header, and the header that I'm looking for is called authorization. So if authorization header is there and it's not null, then I know that the user login was successful, a username and password was correct, and my test is passing. So let me assign the authorization to a new object, authorization header, like this. And I'm also expecting another header which is called user ID, and let's call it also user ID, like this. Let's just double check that the user ID value are correct, and this is exactly the spelling that I used in my code. So for that, I will go to source main Java, and then I'll go to security, and I'll go to authentication filter, scroll down a little bit, and here we have user ID. I used capital ID, so let me take it and paste it here. Okay, and now let's assert that both of these values are not null. So we will use assertions, assert not null, and I will take authorization header, and I will assert that user ID is also not null, like this. Okay, so now if we run this test and the response to this HTTP request is status code 200, and it does contain two headers, authorization header and the user ID header, and the values of authorization header and user ID are not null, then we can be sure that this login request is successful. Okay, so let's try it in the following video, and if something doesn't work, we will fix it.